Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. When I was in my addiction, so much of my time was spent trying to convince myself and the world around me that I didn't have a problem, that there was nothing wrong with what I was doing, the amount of drugs and alcohol I was using. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to maintain a facade, trying to make sure that the way I looked to the world around me looked normal and that there wasn't anything wrong with what I was doing. And that was incredibly stressful. And so when I finally got to a point where I was ready to say, you know what, I have a problem, I need to address it, I need some help, and actually entered treatment to do that, there was a huge sense of freedom that came with that. And it was surprising. I didn't expect to feel freedom from admitting that I had a problem and could never use alcohol or drugs again. I didn't expect that. I had always been scared that that would feel like the opposite of freedom, that I would feel trapped if I ever decided that I couldn't use again. But that's not what happened. So I want to talk about that today and start by reading some of what Tommy Rosen says about it in Recovery 2.0. He says, "The thing I had feared for all those years was that my life would fall apart, that I would be exposed and have to face myself. Well, here I was at rehab. Everything had fallen apart. Strangely, there's an interesting feeling of freedom that goes along with the idea that the worst has happened. Suddenly, there's nothing to fear. Certainly, I felt terrible about myself, but there was no longer a need to keep up appearances. If anyone had ever had a doubt that I was a fuck-up, at least now it was out in the open." So, this is really similar to the way I felt when I went into treatment. For years, I had struggled with the idea of, do I have a problem? And if I have a problem, do I need to do something about it? And then for years after I realized that, yeah, I probably got a problem, it was, well, do I need to really stop using and drinking completely to address that problem? Or is it okay for me to try to just moderate? And then once I stopped drinking, it quickly became, well, is it okay for me to keep using pot, or do I need to stop that too? And it was just this constant battle within me of recognizing that there was a potential problem in my life and not knowing whether I really needed to do anything about it. And in the meantime, continuing to live my life and trying to live it in a way that masked that problem from the rest of the world. Even just talking about it now, I feel exhausted. And the truth is that living life out in the open and living a life where you don't have secrets, it's so freeing, and it's so nice to live a life like that. You know, thinking about my day-to-day life now, there's not a lot that I wouldn't share with anybody else. There's not a lot that I think is abnormal about it. You know, whereas back in my addiction, so much of what I did in life, I did not want other people to know about. You know, so much of what I did, I didn't even want my spouse to know about, in terms of how much I was drinking, how much I was smoking, those kinds of things. It was a life of secrecy. And when you're living in a life like that, there's a feeling of being caged in. There's a feeling of being, of being a captive to the world around you. And I can't tell you how important it is in recovery to embrace not the feeling that you've lost something, that you've given up something, but the feeling that you've gained something by actually exposing your problems to the light and then getting rid of them, and knowing that you don't have anything else to hide. You don't have to hide anything else. That to me is one of the biggest rewards of recovery. One of the biggest blessings of being in a life where I don't have anything to hide, and where I can actually be happy with the way that I'm doing things on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. Every day I sit at the end of the day and think back through the day, take inventory of the day, and look at what could I have done better. And there is always, always, always something, and usually multiple somethings, that I could have and should have done differently. And I don't dwell on them. I just take note of them and think about what I could do different tomorrow to do them differently. But being able to do that is something that I wouldn't have been able to do in my addiction, because every night in my addiction, I ended the day thinking, man, I shouldn't have had this much to drink, or I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have done that. And I couldn't honestly say that the next day I would try to do different. I could never honestly say that. I could never honestly say, okay, well, tomorrow I'm not going to drink, because I knew that wasn't going to happen. But now I can be honest with myself about trying to be different the next day, trying to improve. And again, there's a freedom in that. And that freedom allows you to open yourself up to new experiences in life. It's one of the greatest parts of recovery. But you've got to be willing to put yourself out there, and you got to be willing to be honest with yourself, the world around you, about what's going on and what the problem is. And doing that as I entered treatment, it was incredibly tough. And I think back on that part of my life, and it was hard. And it's hard for everybody who goes through that, but it was worth it. And I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world, because the place I'm at now is the best place I've been in my life. And it all started with the freedom I felt on finally saying, you know what, the gig is up. I gotta stop pretending and be honest and say I need help. And to do that, I gotta surrender. That's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more.